Have you ever started something that at first seemed almost impossible? Well, that's exactly how I felt when I started learning this ancient language, which is Latin. In this video, I'll give you my raw impressions on the struggles, learning the language itself, the victories I've gained over it, and also the bits of wisdom I've collected in this journey to learn Latin through the last couple of weeks. Well, and why learn Latin? Like, why Latin? So, the first part of the answer is pretty simple. I've always wanted to learn, and I've always been intrigued by the language that gave birth to so many, including my own native language, which is Portuguese. And that's the first reason. Second, there is a great philosopher I much admire that said that to deeply practice philosophy, you need to have at least a basic grasp of Latin and some Greek. So that's the second part of it. And that's why I started this Latin learning journey. Alright, so what did I do to start learning Latin? Well, my plan was very easy. I just picked up a great book written by an excellent teacher in my own native language. Otherwise, well, you of course I could go through English or something else, but it just happened that this great book existed in Portuguese, so why not use it? And that's it. I started on page one. It's a grammar, it's a Latin grammar, but it's full of exercises. It's a good one. It's a great book, actually. So I took it and it started there. That's as far as my plan went. I had no clue what I was getting myself into at that point. All right, so there I went, learning Latin. So I picked up the book, started doing the first exercises, and soon enough, I got to my first challenges, the first struggles. And that was pretty simple. So, in order to learn Latin, and the author makes it very clear, you need to really understand stuff that in other languages you can just know by a feeling, and stuff that most people don't really care about unless you are inclined to learn languages naturally, like conjunctions, complements, direct and indirect objects, that kind of stuff. I didn't even know that as well in my own native language, let alone in Latin. Like to understand, to form the Latin sentences and understand them, you need to master this. All right, so why is that a problem? Well, in most languages, we just know this, as I mentioned, kind of as in a feeling. You just know how things work. The languages are built in a way that they almost speak for themselves. It is the case with Portuguese, it is the case with other Romance languages, and less the case with English. Doesn't speak so much for itself, but still, it helps with the structure. You don't need to know the details of what you're doing. It's basically driving a car without knowing what is inside the hood, something like that. With Latin, that's absolutely not the case. You need to know exactly what you're doing because depending on the, well, I'll explain it a bit later, but depending on the syntactic function of a word in a sentence, it changes. So house is not house, it's house yo, house ya. You get the idea. So yeah, there I was. That's my first challenge. But luckily enough, I have been reading more in the recent years, and that led me to learn this kind of stuff sort of in a indirect way. I was sometimes trying to understand a sentence and also reading in other languages, reading in French and English, and trying to understand sentences. And that got me a pretty good idea, reinforced the idea I had from school. Of course, I studied that kind of stuff in school, but just enough to get by. I never deeply understood it and never even cared. So there was. That's my first challenge. So yeah, there was with my first struggles because Latin is a syntactic language, which means the words change their shape depending on their function on the sentence. So if house is an object or if or is the subject of the sentence, it changes. It's not simply house. So there you have it. First issues.
Bruh.
So some of you watching this might not be surprised with this at all because some languages have this synthetic behavior, and for you this is just natural, but it was absolutely not the case for me. In Portuguese we don't have that, in English you don't have that as well, and I had to completely reshape the way I saw languages. I had heard that some languages were more or less like this, but I never experienced that firsthand when trying to learn them. Latin was the first experience I had with that, and it was pretty shocking. So imagine my shock when I figured out that there are 5 distinct groups for the word, so a word can be in one of 5 groups. And on top of that, you have different endings for the word, depending if you're talking about it on the singular or in the plural. So there you have it. You have multiple combinations. It's a mess. You really need to get a good understanding of this. If you skip over this, you'll never understand Latin. Really, you'll find yourself going back and forth all the time, trying to remember, oh, which group does this word belong to? So yeah, to summarize, that was the first issue. Okay, so regardless of the multitude of possible endings, depending on the group of the word, depending on if it's singular or plural or whatever, etc., I kept going. So I just kept going with the book. From page 1, I kept going, doing the exercises. Every chapter they had exercises. But at some point, I hit a very hard wall, and that was when I got to the third group, which is where most of the words fall. All right, so the big first wall and defeat, I would say, I faced while learning Latin was in the third group, as I just mentioned, because most of the words fall in this group, and it has many special cases, many exceptions, and I was trying to move fast. So by trying to move fast and just getting enough of it, I ended up, every time I picked up my notes and I started a study session, I ended up having to review a lot of stuff, and like I spent 15 to 20 minutes just reviewing stuff so I could start again. It felt a bit frustrating. I tried to push through it, but it felt frustrating. And at some point, I just thought, you know what? Right now, I'm kind of busy with other stuff in life, so just leave the Latin aside for a while, and I'll pick it up, and I'll pick it back up again at some point in the future. It's not definitive. It's not the war I'm losing. It's just a battle. So I said, okay, let's just stop it, and I will go back after a while. So after giving up temporarily, right, I decided I would go back to studying Latin. It was a couple of months after that, I think. And what happens is, unsurprisingly, I felt just as much frustration as before, maybe even more, because I was supposed to have retained something, right? And it seemed that it was not the case. I had to be constantly going back and forth, checking stuff, even stuff from the second group, from the first group less often because it's the easiest in my opinion, but from the second group as well, and the third group was just a nightmare. So I ended up giving up again. And you can imagine how hard it was from the perspective of, I'll never do this, I'll never get it. But then sometime later I was thinking about this, and I decided to do it the proper way. So I decided to pick it back up again, the Latin, and I decided to start it all over again. That's it. This time I couldn't give up, and I didn't give up. So I started from page 1, and I went slowly. I took my time. Every lesson I made sure I understood stuff. I did active recalling, that kind of stuff. And at some point, what happened is, without even realizing it, I got past the third group, the third declension. That's how the groups are called, declensions. And I really got it. Like I didn't need to be going back to my notes for every word of the third group. It was a very good point in the learning journey because it really felt I had surmounted a huge obstacle. And that was very good for me. Very good for morale, let's say. So that's it. That's the first victory after a couple of defeats. Yep. Alright, so what about the progress? What have I gained so far from learning Latin? And the first thing I gained, which was pretty nice actually, it was when I started reaping the fruits of my efforts to learn Latin, was that I started understanding better the structure of phrases, even in other languages. So take English for instance. The positioning of words in English has always been odd to me because in Portuguese we place adjectives and we place complements differently than in English. Sometimes in English it comes before the main word, and it never made sense to me until I started learning Latin and understood that it is normal in some languages to do that, and there's a reason for it. So this was a very good thing. Another thing is, this is kind of a hack, which is having the being able to deduce the meaning of words in another languages from the Latin word that is most similar to it. Well, because Latin gave birth to many languages, and also understanding the meaning of common words and their original form. Let's say like republic, which comes from res publica, and I guess I didn't check this one. And also being able to hack through learning other languages in the sense that you can take four words from Latin, and if it's not exactly the same word, it's pretty close most of the times. And it works better with Latin derived languages, of course, like in Italian, that pigrizia means laziness and Regina means queen in both Latin and Italian. That's pretty cool. There's a fun bonus, which is sometimes in movies they put quotes in Latin, and they use known Latin words or less known Latin words, and it felt pretty cool when I was able to understand in John Wick. I don't remember which one of them. Yeah, don't remember which one of them when they pop on the screen. Se vis pacem parabellum, which means if you want peace, prepare for war, get ready for war. It felt pretty cool knowing that it meant that before the translation popping up. So yeah, this is kind of silly, but the small victories that you have after so much effort, they are important to reap, you know? So that's it, but I'm not there yet. Making it sound like this couple of weeks of active Latin learning. I study almost every day, but it's just 25 minutes because, well, I work a full-time job, have other stuff to do. And every time I enter a church with Latin inscriptions, I have a really hard time understanding them. And sometimes I'm not even capable to understand anything besides the common words like Maria and etc. So yeah, that's that. My road to mastering Latin is very long. I have much ahead of me. So yeah, I'll be here for a while. And that's how this channel was born, because I noticed that if I could turn this Latin learning journey into something more fun, I would stick to it better. I would stick more to it. That's why I decided to create this channel, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope we can learn together. And as a bonus thing, there are some really unexpected benefits of learning Latin, which is I noticed that whenever I'm studying it, I get into this super focused state of mind, almost like I was meditating or something like that. And I believe the reason is that unless I'm in that state, I cannot really understand or translate most stuff. Unless I'm really focused on doing what I'm doing, on studying it and phrases, sentences I'm working with, I cannot really do the job that is required to translate and understand all of the beats of the sentences. So yeah, that's a really unexpected thing, but something that I learned to enjoy very much. And whenever I cannot study Latin, I miss going into this super focused state that often at the beginning of the day is a good thing that puts me on a good track for the day. All right, so what about the future? What do I aim to do with this Latin thing? Actually, I don't have any plans. I don't have any ambitions besides understanding life and understanding Latin and being able to read books. So to start with, I picked up this copy of the Aeneid. I don't know how to say it in English, but it's the book from Virgil, and it has. Oh, I don't know if it's focused enough. Yeah, so that's the version. It's an Italian version that has two texts, one in Latin and the other one in Italian. So in this way, I can make sure that I understood what I'm reading instead of just pretending that I understood and having created most of the meaning in my mind when it has nothing to do with the actual text. So I profited that I was in Italy and I bought this book, and I intend to read it, but no hurry. I'm planning to be able to read somewhat of it in 6 months. So read autonomously, I mean, without having the dictionary besides me, because if I do that, I can actually read some stuff already. It takes time, but I can read it. I want to read it without checking every word in the dictionary and every sentence to see if I got it right. So yeah, that's it. That's the plan. Of course, I'll let you know how it went. I'll let you know in 6 months' time if I am able to read anything from this book. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I inspired you to learn something different or something hard that you want to learn but seem impossible. And also to let you know that failures and defeats, they happen. You just need to not give up and you get there. So yeah, thank you very much for watching this video, and I see you next time.